Dr Azzam Tamimi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome back to the Thinking Muslim.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Well, we're talking on Sunday afternoon, and of course yesterday there was an attack on Iran, and the attack has been sustained for the last day and a half. Iran has pushed back by bombing a number of Arab countries, which ostensibly Arab countries, but of course these countries house American bases, and I want to talk about that as we go along. But of course, the news this morning or late last night confirmed the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and this is Iran's supreme leader. So the news cycle is moving very rapidly, and we hope to get this interview out at least by Monday. But of course, in between, many things will happen, as there has been the case in the last 24 hours or so. But let's reflect on the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Does that tell us something about the vulnerability of Iran today?
Well, definitely Iran has proven to be so vulnerable. Although we suspected this was the case for quite some time. If you look at the past few years, and see how many Iranian scientists were assassinated. The mysterious death of the former president and the former foreign minister in a helicopter crash is also, there's so many question marks about this as well. And for Netanyahu to receive a picture of Khamenei, of dead Khamenei, within a short period of time, after his assassination, it just shows you that the infiltration in Iran, the Israeli and probably American infiltration of Iran is so deep and so close to the decision-making circle. But its vulnerability, that's one aspect of its vulnerability. I think there are a number of factors that led to this situation. First of all, the huge gap in terms of technological advance between Iran on the one side and the Americans and the Israeli on the other. The Americans and the Israelis have the most advanced warfare technology in the history of humanity. And they've deployed all of this. Whereas Iran, to a large extent, is quite backward in this because they've been under siege, they had the sanctions, and therefore they tried to produce their own weaponry, but the gap is so huge. Then there is the fact that Iran's neighbors, the Arab neighbors, as well as the non-Arab neighbors, including Azerbaijan, for instance, these are all part of the Israeli-American camp. So Iran literally is surrounded by countries which technically are Israeli or American colonies. There are American bases there is collaboration with Israel. Some of these countries actively collaborate with Israel to protect it, to save it, to prevent any harm from coming to it. And therefore, that's really a major source of vulnerability in the case of Iran. Iran is isolated. Then in Iran, on the inside, yes, the regime has its grassroots, has its constituency, but a growing segment of Iranian society are not with the regime. We don't know the percentage, we don't know the size, but clearly there are many Iranians who would be willing to collaborate with the Americans, with the Israelis, with the devil, in order to see the back of this regime. I have a Ramadan show called My Journey to Islam. I interviewed a sister whose mother is Persian. And I said to her, though, if your mother is Persian, how come you embrace Islam? And she told me that her maternal grandfather converted to Christianity, and her mother was born as a Christian, and so she was born as a Christian. And I asked her, "Is this a phenomenon in Iran?" And she said, "Yes, increasing number of Iranians who are disaffected, who are unhappy, whatever, convert to Christianity, let alone those who are secular or those who are atheists or those who belong to other sects or other religions." So Iran is truly vulnerable, and that's why I don't think whatever they tried to do to prepare themselves for a war like this, they would still be lacking because of these factors.
But one of the strengths of Iran is its ballistic missile technology, and it's used that to great effect, in inverted commas, over the last couple of days. It has tried to hit a number of American assets in Arab countries, but most of them have been intercepted over the skies of Bahrain and Dubai and Doha and elsewhere. Do you think that strategy, that tactic of potentially alienating some of these Arab states, especially states like Qatar, that have actually played a far more neutral role in talks between the two sides, or at least a far more favorable role maybe towards Iranians, do you think that strategy is a worthwhile one?
Well, if you look at it from the Iranian point of view, is it justified for these Arab countries to have American bases from which rockets are fired, from which fighter planes are launched? So it's from the Iranian point of view, it would seem justifiable for them to attack back, especially that they did warn, they did say that whoever participates in a war against us, we consider them to be targets. Although the Iranians, on the record, have said that they were not targeting these countries per se, they were targeting the American installations in those countries. But of course, with rockets, especially when they are intercepted and shot down, the fragments can fall on anybody's head, and that's why we saw some people get killed or wounded in Kuwait, in Qatar, in the UAE. But diplomatically speaking or politically speaking, my opinion would be it would have been better for Iran not to attack its neighbors, because eventually you want to live and coexist with them. But it's really difficult if you are under attack.
Yeah, Iran. Earlier on, we talked about the mismatch between Iran's capabilities and that of Israel and America, and of course that the mismatch is great. But one of the things that we can't help but suggest is that over the last couple of decades, Iran has invested probably over $30 billion on its proxies in the region, which have all been eroded almost now in Syria, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. Do you feel that Iran made a strategic mistake there by spending so much money on forces that ultimately did not survive the test of this sort of Western Zionist alliance, and should have really spent much more money on its own technology at home, especially its defense technology?
Well, in hindsight, it's difficult really to tell, because Iran was early on subjected to a war imposed on it by the Arabs. When Saddam Hussein was incited by the Saudis and the Kuwaitis to invade Iran, and therefore the Iranians felt threatened. So they needed to not only strengthen themselves, they also needed to have proxies. They needed to have allies here and there. In my opinion, it's not as much having proxies that was wrong. I think the Iranian approach to politics in the region is what went wrong. For instance, as a reaction to the war launched by Saddam Hussein on Iran, Iran developed a very extreme sectarian discourse. And then later on, when Saddam Hussein was toppled in Iraq by the Americans, the Iranians interfered intensely and supported extreme Shiite groups in Iraq, which persecuted their opponents, mostly the Sunnis. And therefore this augmented the sectarian the sectarian conflict and widened the divide. Also, when the Arab Spring Revolutions erupted, Iran chose to stand by the tyrants. And I think that was a fatal mistake. They shouldn't have stood against the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They shouldn't have supported Assad in Syria against his own people. So these choices were unwise, and they proved to be detrimental. And you look at what happened eventually. They lost Syria. And a long time ago, before they lost Syria as a member of the so-called axis of resistance, they lost the Syrian people themselves. Today, if you look at the comments the Syrians are making on social media, they are more jubilant than the Israelis and the Americans at what's happening to Iran, which is really very regrettable. But this is because of the Iranian role in Syria. So, in politics, you do look for allies. You create allies if necessary. You create proxies. But it's a question of what sort of policies you adopt. And I think the Iranians have been very unwise. There was probably a time when some Iranians became so arrogant to the extent that they boasted about occupying 4 Arab countries or 4 Arab capitals. And this was said in public. But your question reminded me of another factor that added to Iran's vulnerability, which is the loss of their proxies. Because Hezbollah has been diminished, really. And it is now under arrangement, and it is obliged to observe an arrangement with the Lebanese government, which is very pro-American, probably pro-Israel as well. More pro-Israel than any previous Lebanese government. The Yemenis have been exhausted with the war in Yemen. The Iraqi factions are under control as well. The Americans have reached some sort of an arrangement with the ruling authorities in Baghdad. And the Palestinians naturally couldn't help Iran much anyway, whether before the 7th of October 2023 or after.
Recently, I met a viewer who told me something that stopped me in my tracks. The Thinking Muslim didn't just inform him, it fundamentally changed how he sees the world. And that wasn't a one-off. A leader of the global Sumud convoy explained that one of our episodes moved him from passive viewing to meaningful action. A young man from Sudan shared that he learned English by listening to the show and is now inspired to serve the Ummah. Madrasas had integrated the podcast into their university curriculum. From day one, The Thinking Muslim was never meant to be just another podcast. It was built on a simple conviction that our Ummah deserves media rooted in faith, justice, and intellectual seriousness. Media that strengthens Iman while confronting the world honestly and courageously. We are now dubbing our content into multiple languages. We have launched new collaborations, including a program with Imam Tom Fakini and a youth-focused show for the next generation. And by taking The Thinking Muslim on the road, I have seen firsthand the hunger within our Ummah for substance, depth, and principled leadership. What comes next is even more ambitious. A history show told with meaning for today. a series on transformative figures, a political seerah and content designed especially for children. The vision alone is not enough. To build studios, train presenters and create professional media that can stand shoulder to shoulder with the best, we need sustained support from people who believe this work matters. Join us today, become a member at thinkingmuslim.com/membership and help us build what our community truly deserves. Can I turn to the nuclear talks that were taking place in Geneva, which previously were held in Muscat? And of course, Oman was very integral to that conversation and those indirect talks between Witkoff and the Iranian representatives. Yesterday, the Iranian foreign minister went on TV and unprecedentedly really declared that this action was unnecessary. The Iranians had already committed to 100% removal of their enrichment technology. So the Iranians were compromising, it seems to me. They were relenting on some of the key conditions that the Americans had placed to prevent military action. Untangle that for me. Why did the Americans strike at this stage when talks were really to their advantage?
It is amazing that the Iranians haven't learned a lesson from the 12-day war last summer.
Yeah.
Because the same scenario has been repeated. The Americans claimed they were having negotiations, that they were serious about them, and then eventually they took them by surprise and attacked them. And I think the Iranians fell again into the same pit. I know that the Iranians, from their point of view, they wanted to avoid the war, but they should have known better. They should not have been so naive. And now the Israelis are telling us that the decision to go to war was already taken weeks ago, and even the timing was agreed upon between Netanyahu and Trump. So all these negotiations were simply a facade to cover the real plan. The plan was to go to war, simply because the two men in Washington and in Tel Aviv, they wanted the war. They were not interested in any compromise from the Iranians. So whatever compromise the Iranians were prepared to make, that was not going to avert the war.
Why? Why did they want the war?
Both Netanyahu and Trump had several reasons for this, including personal reasons. Netanyahu prolonged the war in Gaza exactly for this reason. He was going to go to jail. He was being pursued by the courts of his country. And therefore, he was looking for any excuse to stay out of this legal predicament. Now, similarly, Trump today is not so popular. His popularity is declining. Even his MAGA camp is divided. And many of the things he promised to the American people, he has not been able to achieve. And I suspect, like many people around the world suspect too, Netanyahu has something on Trump. Most probably he is blackmailing him. Really? It's likely to be connected to the Epstein files. Probably if Trump wasn't so vulnerable to blackmail from the Zionists, from Netanyahu himself, he might have kept his word and not started a war, because this is what he promised a long time ago.
Yeah. And why does Israel want this conflict? What is Israel trying to do to Iran in the long term?
Well, the Iranians have always been perceived as a threat to Israel. Of course, they created Hezbollah, they supported Hezbollah, they funded it, they armed it, they supported many of the Palestinian factions, initially Islamic Jihad and then Hamas. And of course, on the basis of their own ideology, they would never recognize Zionism or the legitimacy of the State of Israel. So to the Israelis, they were always perceived as a threat. So if you can change the regime, if you can seize a certain moment in history where that regime can be changed, you wouldn't say no to that opportunity.
Is there a broader plan towards the Muslim world? I mean, a lot of people have been citing historic speeches that Netanyahu gave where he talked of breaking up, carving up the Muslim world and making these states effectively useless when it comes to the power balance between itself and these countries. And then, of course, there's talk of the Greater Israel Project. Like, untangle all of that for me. What's Israel's ideal plan for the Muslim world?
Of course, it is in Israel's interest to for the Arab world to remain divided, remain incapable of protecting itself, let alone helping others or supporting the resistance against Zionism. And the Israelis have, since the creation of the State of Israel in Palestine in 1948, the Israelis have pursued this strategy of working with minorities, empowering them, in the hope that one day they will be able to seed and separate themselves and establish an entity of their own. And it is no secret that they had historical links with some of the leaders of the Kurds in Iraq and elsewhere. Look how they used the Druze community in Palestine, and they were hoping to do the same in Syria. So yes, definitely, especially in countries that have a potential. Countries like Iraq, Syria, Egypt, these are big countries. Algeria, they'd be keen to create havoc within these countries, divide them, fragment them if possible. That helps the Zionist project to continue and to prolong itself.
So the aim isn't necessarily regime change initially, at least in Iran. The aim is really to make Iran ungovernable, to make it descend into chaos, like Iraq descended into chaos.
Well, in the case of Iran, they cannot repeat the Iraqi experience, because in Iraq, that changing the regime required boots on the ground.
Right.
They had to invade. In the case of Iran, they know that this is going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible to do. So instead, they adopted the strategy they're executing at the moment. Remove the top officials in the hope of creating a sense of frustration, of desperation, probably bring to the fore some elements from within the regime that are willing to work with the Americans and the Israelis, people who can be described as pragmatists, as moderates, as whatever, but still better, incite the detractors of the regime, the opponents of the regime, to take to the streets and probably start some sort of an uprising. And they tried this a few weeks ago. They did try this. It didn't work. And I think that's the essence of Trump's message to the Iranians yesterday or several hours ago, when he said to them, okay, now you have the country, you decide for yourselves who you want to rule you. How are they going to do this? Not through elections, of course, but through an uprising of some sort.
I mean, Dr. Tamimi, what does this tell us about the ideology of Donald Trump? I mean, Trumpism was all about America first. Trump became president in his first term and second term, eschewing the idea of foreign entanglements, in particular wars in the Middle East. He talked against regime change, the sort of the civilizational engineering of Bush and others. Yet he has done the same thing. Like, what does that tell us about Trumpism and the way in which this American system really functions? Because it seems like there's much connection with the past rather than a severing of that past.
Well, people who know Trump well, they say he is not a man of ideology. He's just acting like a businessman in the world of politics. But what he's done, he entered into some sort of contract with people who have an ideology, the Christian Zionists, the evangelicals in America, who are evil, who are more Zionist than any Jewish Zionist. And he also did something else. He created his own parallel institution. The traditional American institutions are no longer functioning. He is no longer using them the way former presidents used them. So he brought in a group of people who are willing to do exactly what he tells them to do, or who are part of that ideology, the evangelical Zionist ideology. And therefore, the State Department has lost its role. The CIA has lost its traditional law. The FBI, the judiciary, etc., because he is acting in the name of all of these institutions, but in a parallel way, not through the traditional circles of these institutions. And look at the officials he surrounded himself with. They're just thugs, or people who never had an experience within the established institutions of American politics.
Let's talk about scenarios, what happens next, because of course Iran isn't Iraq. Iran is, regardless of all of its vulnerabilities, Iran is a far more coherent state, and its central authority is far more adept at dealing with these sorts of international crises. I mean, do you believe that, I don't know, the Americans, they've misperceived the next few days? They believe it's almost a Venezuela type of solution, where in reality the Iranians are going to hunker down and they're going to fight because it's an existential crisis now for the regime, for the government. Is that how you see things going? I mean, could this take weeks, if not months, to resolve?
Yes, of course, definitely. Iran is not Venezuela. And if Trump thought he could achieve in Iran what he achieved in Venezuela using the same tactics, he's definitely mistaken, and he will see this for himself.
Yeah.
But I think the Israelis themselves understand that Iran is not Venezuela. But they're hoping that by severing the head, as they did, that will pave the way for a dynamic within Iran that will deliver the results they're looking for. It might not happen within days or within weeks or even months, but I think this is what they're hoping to achieve. And as I mentioned earlier, Iran has proven to be heavily infiltrated. And most likely, the Mossad is working hard now to mobilize its agents, its elements, in the hope of seizing this opportunity, especially when people are very sad and very disappointed that within a day this has happened to a huge country like Iran.
Visit btml.us/thinkingmuslim to learn more and give.
Can I ask you, I mean, prior to this this conflict with Iran, there was a lot of talk, especially from the Israeli camp, of a newly formed Sunni Axis. And a lot of it came out of Saudi Arabia's turnaround, I suppose, about turn when it comes to its relationships with the UAE and by extension with Israel. Explain that to me. Like, do you think there are real prospects of some form of Sunni Axis forming? And there was a commentator who argued that partly the demise of this Shia axis, or the demise of Iran's ability to maneuver in the region, is given the unintended consequence of that is a form of unity that we haven't seen between Turkey and Qatar and Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and others, Malaysia and others. Do you think this is an exaggeration of the current situation in the sort of a Sunni Arab world or Sunni Muslim world?
Well, prior to the 7th of October 2023, the Israelis were very optimistic about the prospects of such an axis. I mean, they call it a Sunni axis. It's not really a Sunni axis because all these rulers who rule majority Sunnis are persecuting the Sunnis more than anything else. But anyway, they call it the Sunni axis. They were hoping that Saudi Arabia would join the Abrahamic Accords. And if Saudi Arabia did that, Pakistan, Indonesia, probably others were going to follow suit.
Yeah.
But then the 2-year war disrupted this for them. The Saudis have recently become more anxious about this entire plan. And their disagreements and differences with the UAE brought this to the surface. And they've even allowed some writers to freely condemn the UAE for its close association with the Zionists or with Zionism or with Israel. So the 2-year war on Gaza disrupted that plan. Perhaps now that they're doing what they're doing to Iran, and if their dream of a regime change is fulfilled, they might go back and rekindle that plan. But we have to wait and see. There is no sign. There's nothing to tell us that the regime in Iran will fall or will be replaced by a pro-American or pro-Israel regime. But I'm just assuming that if were this to happen in the distant future, of course, that would be a great boost for the Israeli plan to be part of a Sunni, some sort of, and then it won't be called a Sunni, it would be called something else, some sort of an axis in the region.
But I'm talking more about like a positive axis, a convergence of Muslim countries that are far more critical of Israel and far more critical of the United States and carve out a more independent path. And some commentators have argued that we see glimmers of that on the horizon with Saudi Arabia's about turn on the UAE and Israel and others. I mean, do you feel we all aspire towards that? We all want that. We know that this is the way forward for the Muslim world in general, not just the Sunni Muslim world or the Arab Muslim world. But do you see any prospect of that being real and on the horizon at this moment in time?
I don't see any signs of this happening. I think some people misread the Saudi position. I know that some people have hailed the Saudi position when they saw these war of words between them and Abu Dhabi. But we have to remember that this is because of personal reasons, not because of ideological reasons, not because of patriotic reasons. The pupil, Muhammad bin Salman, woke up to realize that his teacher, Muhammad bin Zayed, was actually just using him. And therefore, he reacted. So I wouldn't read more than this in it. The rest of the region, I mean, look at the Indonesians. The Indonesian president is so pro-Israel, pro-America. Whatever the Israelis want from him, he's willing to give them. The Pakistanis, I'm not that optimistic. I mean, these army officers who removed a democratically elected prime minister and are now tormenting him in prison. I don't see them in any positive light. So where is that Sunni axis that is against Israel? I don't see it really. To some extent, Turkey and Qatar have been more critical, but they themselves also are under enormous pressure. Turkey is part of NATO. Turkey has had full diplomatic relations with Israel for many years. Turkey was, at least for the first year of the war on Gaza, was very negative in from the Palestinian perspective. They allowed the export of gas and foodstuff to Israel, despite what Israel was doing to Gaza. I can understand that they are under enormous pressure, and therefore you don't, unless there is a major change in the region. And this takes me to the point that is to do with the more distant future. I think the war on Iran and the association of so many Arab regimes and their collaboration with the American-Israeli axis will expedite the next eruption in the region.
Really?
This is what will happen. But these regimes themselves, it would be naive to expect much good out of them, any of them. But if the eruption happens, and that eruption leads to a radical change, then yes, we are looking at a different future.
And of course, like always, we start these conversations, we end it with a reflection on what is happening to the Palestinians, what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. And you are someone who's intimately involved in the so-called Palestinian struggle, or the struggle for Palestine. Things look pretty bleak at the moment, again, in Gaza, despite the ceasefire. And in the West Bank, now we have a wholesale resettlement of or settlement of the Palestinian areas by the Zionists. Do you see any hope on the horizon in the short to medium term in any of these two places?
The situation is very bleak, very painful. Short term, no, I don't see. There are no good news really on the short term, but on the medium to long term, yes, of course. And you see, the reason for this is the nature of Israel itself. The Israelis believe that if they decapitate Hezbollah, or they decapitate Hamas, or if they decapitate the Iranian regime, then they can change things. No, things will not change in their favor simply because of their own nature. Whether it is Iran or Hezbollah in Lebanon or Hamas in Palestine, whether it is the Palestinians or any other Arabs or any other Muslims, for them it is the idea, and the idea doesn't die, it lives on. And the idea is that Zionism is a colonial, racist project. No matter what the Israelis and their supporters do to reinforce and to bolster and to strengthen this entity in the heart of the Arab world, it will continue to be seen by the majority of the Arabs and the majority of the Muslims, and hopefully very soon by the majority of world public opinion, as a racist, illegal settlement project.
And one last thing to ask you. In the UK, of course, we've had an amazing victory by the Green Party in this by-election in Gorton and Denton, where on the back of actually a large Muslim population, Muslim vote, the Green Party were able to not only win that seat, which is a Labour seat, it hasn't switched hands from Labour since the 1930s, but also it pushed Labour into third place in that seat. What does that tell us about the Muslim vote and just sort of Muslim voters around the country, and how resilient they are since the last election, which was dubbed the Gaza election, but also about maybe a realignment in British politics, where the two big parties now no longer are going to dominate the political landscape as they used to dominate before?
Well, indeed, this recent development is a landmark in British politics. And I think it's very important for the Muslims to learn an important lesson from this, that we need to join others, enter into partnerships, form alliances with people who see eye to eye on ethical issues. Gaza was a main issue here, but also the needs of the British people, their grievances, the hypocrisy of politicians, foremost among them Starmer and his clique, who took the Labour Party in a direction that many former Labour supporters detest. And therefore, the Muslim minorities in this country, no matter how small they are, if they pursue such a strategy of joining hands with others who agree with them on the fundamental issues of human rights, of democracy, of social justice, of equality, etc., I think they can effect a major change in this country. Because neither Labour nor Conservative, and for that right, no reform, of course, are good for the British people. And the Green have emerged as an alternative, and they seem to be on the rise. The Green or whoever else that believes in these values. And this is not about being a Muslim or is a Muslim vote or not a Muslim vote. This is about being ethical, being moral, being true to the values you believe in. Whether you are Muslim or Christian or Jewish, and the leader of the Greens is Jewish anyway, but he is a man of values. And this is really what matters.
Dr. Azzam Tamimi, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for your reflections today.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Now you've reached the end of this show, and the fact that you've stayed until the very end tells me that you truly believe in our work. Please consider making a one-off donation or becoming a member by visiting thinkingmuslim.com/membership. Now your contributions give you exclusive behind-the-scenes access and the ability to ask questions to our guests, and monthly calls with myself, my team, and our guests like Sami Hamdi. Jazakallah khair, and keep us in your du'as.